Hello, everyone. My name is Francis Donald, and I'd like to welcome you to this 18th session in an ongoing series of webinars on sacred number and geometry. The first 17 sessions are available on makara.us. If you have any questions about the GoToMeeting interface, feel free to text BL in your text box in the lower control panel. And if you'd like to add your name to the list of readers, and we encourage you to do that, please raise your hand now, and BL will add you to the list. More readers we have to draw from, the better, and also it helps us to kind of get to know each other. Okay, before we turn off the talking head camera, please take a good look at this three-dimensional figure. I'll be talking about this a lot during the webinar. It's one of 5 Platonic solids, so that gives you a hint. We'll be coming back to it soon. Okay. Okay. We spent most of the last webinar exploring the seed and the flower of light. During this session, we'll apply what we've learned about these two figures as well as the six-pointed star to further our understanding of DK's Formula 1, the formula of revelation. This is a deep, complex subject of vital importance to all seekers, and we'll take this entire webinar just to begin to grasp its implications. Okay, we'd like a reader right off the top for this DK quote, please.
Okay, please go ahead, Scott.
Okay. These formulas, when rightly studied and eventually somewhat apprehended, carry the disciple to the point where that which is new, hitherto unrealized and for which no words exist, is suddenly contacted. St. Paul had reached such a point when he referred to the third heaven as it veiled the seventh, which was the original wording deleted by the recipients of his message at that time as utterly meaningless.
Thank you. So the reason we are studying this formula in these webinars is made clear by this first in a series of commentaries on the formulas. DK says, the formulas are second-ray presentations of soul ideas. Essentially, they are geometrical forms, lying behind all exoteric manifestations. Even when presented as words or phrases, they are susceptible of being reduced to definite forms. They are building patterns. So you may remember that the second is the ray of the great geometrician. So we'll begin our analysis of Formula 1 by attempting to determine the geometrical form that lies behind the words of the formula. So let's read the formula, get it fresh in our minds. Could we get a reader, please?
Sure. Let me find Malia. There we go. Please go ahead, Malia.
A line of fire between two blazing points, a stream of water blue, again a line, emerging from the earth and ending in the ocean. A tree with root above and flowers below. Out of the fire and always at the midway point appears the eye of God, Shiva. Upon the stream between the two extremes there floats the eye of vision. A thread of light unites the two. Deep in the tree, between the root and flowers, the eye again is seen. The eye that knows, the eye that sees, the directing eye, one made of fire, one fluid as the sea, and two which look from here to there. Fire, water, and the earth all need the vital air. The air is life. The air is God.
Thank you, Malia. This formula in prose form gives us at once more and less information than we get when viewing a geometrical figure or symbol. More because we gain a lot of subjective detail. Less because the specific geometry is not spelled out for us. Now, in order to determine that geometry, we'll need to break our rules of procedure and at least touch on the meaning and significance of the elements of our figure before we proceed with a physical analysis. This is because in our effort to reverse engineer the geometry, meaning plays a large part in determining that geometry. So, let's start by taking a look at the geometrical elements described in the formula. What do you see in this formula that could be part of a geometrical figure? I'm not asking you for the figure itself, just what elements in this formula are geometrical and might become part of an overall geometry of the figure. Any ideas? Biel, do we have any takers?
Not yet.
Anybody have any thoughts?
Not yet, but I'm pretty sure their brains are churning.
Well, if the past is any indication. Anybody have any ideas? What are some simple geometrical elements that appear in this formula?
Malia says several references to line.
Exactly. Several references to lines. That's the most obvious geometrical element, isn't it? There is another one, but it's a bit veiled. Not too terribly much, but a bit. Anybody have an idea what that might be?
Anne says symmetry.
Well, there is symmetry, that's true. It's described in a very symmetrical way, isn't it? Anybody have a thought about
Please
any
go ahead,
other
Scott.
points? Yeah.
Thinking of the eye of vision, it's circular.
Yes, that's right. And it could also represent a point because of its of where it appears.
Here's the midpoint and several oppositions here. So
Right.
it's looking similar to your diagram above.
Right. Yeah, that's the sort of hint there, isn't it? That the eye represents the center point. Good, thanks. Okay, so in the first part we find three lines described. A line of fire, a line of water, both described specifically as lines, and an implied line represented by a reversed tree. Each of these three lines joins two endpoints, making 6 endpoints in all. You may remember that 6 plays a key role in all the formulas. DK says, actually, let's get a reader for this.
Please go ahead, Anne.
Hello,
Yes,
Hi.
can you hear me? They contain or veil the 6 prerequisites of initiation and are therefore 6 in number. They indicate the 6 relationships of the 6 intermediate stages of consciousness to be found between initiation signal. Sorry. They have unique they have unique reference to the pattern of the initiate consciousness.
Thank you. Yeah, so we can see his emphasis on 6 here is not incidental. The second and third sections of the formula introduce the eyes that appear at the midway point of each line. There are a couple of additional details. First, the eye of fire and the eye of water are united by a thread of light. Secondly, the eye that, oops, let me get back up here. There we go. The eye that appears in the reversed tree is dual. So we have two lines with articulated endpoints, each with a central eye joined by a thread of light, and a third line also with articulated endpoints, that's the tree, but with a dual central point. Each of these three lines represents an element, with a fourth element, air, surrounding the other three. So now for the big question, what geometrical figure or figures include the above listed element, could make sense of the above listed elements? Any ideas? Now I don't necessarily expect you to get this. I had to contemplate it for some time. But if you do have an idea, raise your hand and share it with us. Anybody? Any thoughts?
Heidi had her hand up, but then it went down again. So,
Okay.
Okay. Please, Heidi, you're on self-mute, but I've got you unmuted. So if you can unmute yourself, you can talk. And while she's working that out, Anne says the tetrahedron.
Interesting. The tetrahedron. Okay. Well, would you like to talk about why that would be so?
Okay. Oh, wait a minute. Heidi just got herself off of.
Okay, but let's stick with the tetrahedron for now, and then we'll go back to Heidi.
Okay. Anne?
Anne, any thoughts about how or why the tetrahedron could be related to this?
The number 4 came up because I was thinking about 4 elements.
Yes,
and the tetrahedron has the number 4 inside it.
Well, it certainly does. It has 4 vertices. So you could place the elements at each vertice, which is, could be quite interesting.
And
way to look at it. Yeah.
Not only that, but if it starts spinning, because when we have a line with 2 fires and it starts spinning, it makes the cross. I can't remember the name. The cross that has as the line spins, the fire goes on the other side, and the swastika. Exactly.
Yes.
Yes.
Actually, stay tuned for the next webinar. We're going to explore the swastika. But yes. Okay, that's very interesting. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts about possible candidates for geometrical forms for this formula of revelation? Any thoughts?
I have a comment, but let's go back to Heidi and see. Okay, Heidi, did you have a comment?
Well, I've been having a hard time with the webinar piece, but I see half circles too, which are interesting to me. So and half circles always make up a wholeness. If I'm looking in a certain way at this.
Well, half circles certainly are an element of a line, because if you have a half circle, you also have a line that creates that half circle.
Correct.
So it's that's interesting. It could be a description of any one of these axes. Yeah. Do you have anything else to say about that?
I think most everything has been said. I was listening to the lady before, and if you're not keeping it in a 2-dimensional place, there's a lot more to be seen.
And we're not.
There's a pyramidal shape.
The tetrahedron is pyramidal, except for its 3 sides with a 3-sided base instead of 4 sides. But yeah. Right. Okay. Well, thank you, Heidi. Anyone else have
Yes,
any thoughts?
we have several comments. Gabrielle
Okay.
says a double tetrahedron above and below, sharing the base triangle, 3 elements above and 3 below.
Aha. Excellent. Yes, that would work. Thank you for that.
Helen, oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
Helen says the hexagon formed by connecting the outer points.
Yes, that is probably the best two-dimensional figure, and I'll be exploring that to some extent. So good, yes.
And
Any others?
Anne says the cone.
Interesting, the cone. Well, it's certainly, I could see placing the eye at the top of the cone, which is, the cone is kind of an extension of the circle with the point in the center, which you see represented here. It's like a three-dimensional variation of the circle with the point in the center. In fact, Michael Robbins often uses it in meditation to imagine spiraling up the cone. So Michael is going to be with us today, but these webinars start at 11 p.m. for him. And he has another webinar at 5:30 in the morning, and just couldn't do it. So, okay. Well, I'm going to move ahead from there. That's some great ideas. I found 4 possible candidates: 2 two-dimensional and 2 three-dimensional figures. First possibility that I explored was the equilateral triangle, with the 3 line/elements making up the sides. The 4th element, air, is represented by the enclosed space. The 3 central points form an invisible central triangle connected by a threads of light. This somewhat fulfills the geometrical requirements, though in this figure the 6 clearly defined endpoints are joined to become the 3 vertices of the triangle, which is less than satisfactory. Just a moment. However, if we use this two-dimensional figure, which somebody suggested, this places the central points together by arranging the 3 lines so that they cross each other. We get the 6 articulated endpoints. If we then enclose the figure within a hexagon, the 3 line/elements share a common space, which fulfills the requirement that all are touched by the element of air. The 3-dimensional version of this figure is the cube. Indeed, the hexagon, with its axes depicted, is an orthogonal view of a cube. So you see on the right side there, you're actually looking 3-dimensionally through the cube. And I've aligned it, I created this in a 3D program, and I aligned it so that the top upper point is directly in with the bottom back point. So that is indeed a 3-dimensional cube. Okay. As a cube, the 3 line/elements become the 3 axes of the cube. But using the cube does pose a couple of problems. First, there are 8 vertices in a cube, not 6. So the 6 points of the 3 lines will need to be assigned to the central point of each of the 6 faces of the cube. The second problem is that philosophically the cube is a form-based vehicle or figure. DK calls them the imprisoning cubes. Not really a fit vehicle for the formula of revelation. But there is another Platonic solid that has 3 axes oriented just as they are in the cubist space. Gabrielle was on the right track, the idea of 2 tetrahedrons with having a common base and extending in opposite directions. But this figure that I'll introduce is an actual Platonic solid. It has 6 vertices instead of 8, and its sides are equilateral triangles rather than squares. Does anyone have any idea as to what this figure might be? Anybody?
Trudy, go ahead, please.
It's an octahedron.
Ding, ding, ding. Absolutely. Yes?
Yeah.
Great, thank you. It's an octahedron, and it is what's called the dual of a cube, meaning that when placed within a cube, its 6 points are conjunct the central point of each of the faces of the cube. Keep this in mind when we get to the meaning and significance part of our analysis. The relationship between these two figures is very interesting that way. Using the octahedron allows the 3 axes to represent the formula's 3 lines/elements, and their 6 endpoints to be represented by the 6 vertices. And of course, the element of air becomes the enclosing space within the octahedron. The octahedron and the hexagon have more in common than first meets the eye. Note how, remember, the hexagon is really our best candidate in a two-dimensional world, and you can see that they're directly connected. So note how that when we rotate a semi-transparent octahedron, it creates a hexagon and 6-pointed star. This is actually a rotated octahedron, which I created in a 3D program. In both the octahedron and the hexagon, the central points, or eyes, are merged at the center. At first, this doesn't seem to work, since the formula describes an eye for each element. But what if we view the 3 eyes as having their source in one eye, a unified central point expressing itself in 3 modes of manifestation, represented by the 3 separate axes? When seen from the perspective of the axis of Earth, it appears in the consciousness of the seeker as the dual directing eye. When seen from the perspective of the axis of water, it appears in the consciousness of the seeker as the eye of vision. And when seen from the perspective of the axis of fire, it appears in the consciousness of the seeker as the eye of Shiva. Viewed in this way, the octahedron and the hexagon begin to work better as candidates for representing our formula. We have a precedent for this perspective in many of the world religions. For instance, the trinity of Shiva, Vishnu, and Brahma is, from a causal point of view, one being, just as the colors red, blue, and green together make white. Notice the red, blue, and green axes, and when they come together, they make white. But we're still left with a couple of problems. The first, especially in the octahedron, is orientation. Which of the 3 elements do we place on the vertical axes? The strongest contender seems to be fire, since it's often a metaphor for spirit. But we also have the reverse tree, which can be seen as a symbol for the tree of life, the roots representing its source in spirit. And we have another problem, the quote, 2 eyes which look from here to here in connection with the element of earth. Actually, a possible solution to both these problems is given in this phrase, 2 eyes which look from here to there. Any ideas as to what that solution may be? Take a close look at this phrase. What is it suggesting? You want to have a thought? Yeah?
Not yet.
Any ideas about what this phrase, 2 eyes which look from here to there, might be suggesting?
Please go ahead, Heidi.
Well, if you take a dualistic point of view, then you have 2 eyes. But if the two eyes are no longer seen from a dualistic point of view, then they see from the one eye.
Yeah, I think that's overall the how you reconcile this difference between the many eyes and the one. But there's something specific in this phrase that I'm getting at. Does anyone else have a thought as to what that might be?
The only other word that I would say is that you have the word from here to there, which actually has to do with time and space.
And motion or direction.
And motion and direction.
Right. So what is the motion associated with in this solar system? What's the motion?
It's spherical. It's spinning. It's through a sphere, is the way that I see it. Or you could say it's through cone, in that one where you have the two cones coming into the one.
Well, actually, a cone describes very well the motion of the solar system, but I'm looking for a specific word. And you could get it. Actually, I'm really glad you brought that up, because it's a combination of the base of the cone, which is a circle, or rotational, and the top point of the cone, which represents direct or linear motion. And when you combine these two motions, what do you get? Anybody?
A timeless state.
Well, I'm looking for a more specific.
I have several people who are saying spiral.
That's it. That's what I'm looking for. It's spiralic. And DK tells us this, that in the previous solar system and in relation to the third aspect of nature, we have rotational motion. In this solar system, or I should say in the next solar system, and also in relation to the first aspect of pure spirit and deity, we have direct motion. And in this solar system, we have a combination of the two, which creates this spiralic motion.
Catherine actually defines it as spiral cyclic.
Spiral cyclic, yeah, well, okay, yeah. Now, when we add motion and direction to our figure, from here to there, right, the upward orientation, because remember, one of the definitions of form and consciousness in manifestation is that it's always in motion. And that motion can be looked at in a lot of ways. It's always undergoing change, and it's always literally in some form of movement. So when we add motion and direction to our figure, the upward, oops, here we go. I hit a wrong button, and it took me to the top of my presentation. So here we go. Getting back on here. All right. So when we add motion and direction to our figure, the upward orientation spirals from one element to the next as it rotates, whereas the central point, the central point follows a direct motion. In this illustration, the figure begins with the red axis pointing vertically, and then ends with the blue axis in the vertical position. When we imagine our figure in motion, the octahedron, which has no directional bias inherent within its structure, meaning that it's completely symmetrical, works better than our hexagon, since spiralic motion can only occur in 3D space. At least the metaphor of motion, spiralic motion, as we know it to be. In DK's second definition of these formulas, he says they indicate energy direction as a definite part of the creative work. DK gives at least a partial verification for the octahedron in this figure, which appears on page 275 of Discipleship in the New Age, Volume 2. From DK's description, this figure represents the perspective of one who has mastered all the formulas. Now, if you're used to looking at orthogonal views of 3D geometry, you may notice that though this is a 2D figure, it is also very similar to the top view of a sphere enclosed within an octahedron. Here's the old commentary describing this figure. Can we get a reader for this, please?
Scott, please go ahead.
The outer square, the circle of the one, and the point of unity are seen as one, and the master passes on his way. He has penetrated to the center by passing along the Atakarana, which he himself constructed. There he polarizes himself and takes his stand, and from thence, at the center of the circle and within the square of service, he precipitates the energies and forces which that service demands.
Thank you. Okay, would anyone like to suggest any other geometrical figures that might represent our formula, maybe during this time describing the figures, you may have thought of something. If not, I'd like to move ahead with the first step of our analysis. Anybody have any ideas?
I don't see anything yet. No
Okay,
hands,
let's
no
go ahead.
comments. Okay.
Okay, let's go ahead. If we could get a reader for this, please.
Yeah, hold on, let me see. Gabriel, would you please read that?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Exoterically, this involves study of its form as a whole, of its lines, and therefore of its numerical significance, and also study of its sectional forms, by which I mean its arrangements.
Thank you. So, what can we say about the lines, the numerical significance, and the arrangement of the forms described in Formula 1 and or the octahedron? Extra credit for observations that relate the octahedron to the formula. At this point, we're not looking for meaning or significance, but rather for a tabulation of physical attributes and how these attributes physically relate to the formula of revelation. You're welcome to make comments that apply only to the octahedron or only to the formula as long as those comments describe physical attributes. Your observations may seem obvious, like the ones listed here, that's fine. Any observations that help us physically define Formula 1 and or the octahedron are useful. Okay, I'll start off our list by reiterating some previous observations. First, the octahedron has 3 axes whose endpoints are its 6 vertices. This correlates with the 3 lines described in the formula of revelation, which are associated with fire, water, and earth. The 4th element, air, is represented by the enclosed space of the octahedron. Another point, the crossing point of these 3 axes is the central point of the figure, which represents the unified I described in the formula. This point is at once the central point of each axis and the central point of all 3 axes. Okay, any further observations? What other physical attributes do you see in the octahedron and or Formula 1? Anyone? Biel, do we have any takers?
Not yet.
anything at all. Remember, on these physical attributes, they can be quite obvious, but it's good to get them out and described so they can become part of the mix.
Nothing yet.
Actually, while you're thinking, I'm going to turn off my phone because one time I got a call right in the middle of our closing meditation. So.
Okay, we got a question here from Malia.
Sure.
She says, I have a question relating to the comparative length of the 3 lines within the octahedron.
Right. Yeah. You remember when I was showing you that picture in the figure at the beginning? I was rotating that figure. The reason I did that is because these solids are impossible to get a full sense of by even an accurate two-dimensional representation like these. In fact, all the axes are of equal length because all the triangles are equilateral. Now you couldn't get that from looking, for instance, at this figure because it's in perspective. So you have to understand that there's an equal quality to the lines and the axes and the shapes of the triangles. So any other thoughts?
The reason I asked is because my mind is keeping jumping to what we dealt with in the last one, which had to do with the golden ratio.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know why, but it's being very persistent.
Oh, I see. Okay. Well, let's see. No, there's no. These ratios are all equal.
Okay.
So, for instance, the upright axis looks very much like the longest of them, but
Yeah.
It's not, because if you are to turn this figure so that either of the other 2 axes are in the upright position, it's identical. That's what I meant when I said that there's no bias in this form as to its shape. So it's also an important philosophical aspect of this, that these axes aren't physically different, right?
Okay.
So any of them can be vertical. Okay. Anybody have any thoughts about the geometry of this figure?
Okay, we have several comments and then a hand up. So, okay, Helen says all 3 types of crosses are represented, meaning the fixed, cardinal, and mutable.
Very interesting. Okay. I would say that probably belongs to the second part of our analysis, but it's a good observation. Thank you.
Jeremy says there are 6 vertices.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, in fact, that's very much, one of the strongest reasons that it was chosen to represent this formula. Mm-hmm.
Gabrielle says, looking out from any axis's endpoint, you would see an equal armed cross.
That's quite true. Yeah, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
And Anne says 2 squares, there must be more. And now let's go to Heidi.
Okay, to answer Anne's question, there are 3. 1 for each axis, but yeah, we'll get to that. I have a description of that coming up, including with the illustrations. Yeah, go ahead.
I think everybody has said everything. The only thing is that each end point that always ends in the center point in that place where the colors are meeting together, the white,
Mm-hmm.
the white actually eliminates the point in the center.
Eliminates what?
The point in the center. So it's like everything started from that point, but when it went to the outer edges and then returned back into itself, there's no longer a point that can be seen. It becomes invisible.
Yeah, it moves into another dimension. That's, you bring up a good point, and we tend to forget this, that esoterically considered, all these forms emanate from the center. They're not created from the outside inward, though often that's how we analyze them. Thank you, Heidi. Anyone else have other thoughts about the physical attributes?
Please go ahead, Scott.
Are we talking simply also about the equilateral triangles that make this up? The slant side that's a square root of 2 in relation to the other two sides of the internal triangle.
Yeah. So state again what you're looking at.
The fact that it's being an octahedron has 8 equilateral triangles. The slants of any one of them is the square root of 2 in relationship to the internal sides of that triangle, seen from the axes that you portrayed there.
Yes. Okay. Right. Because that's the nature of an equilateral triangle. Thank you. Anyone else?
Anne says the sphere inside and out.
Right. There is like all platonic solids, this figure can be enclosed in a sphere, and all 6 points would touch the inner surface of that sphere. And a sphere could be put inside it, and the points of that sphere would touch in the middle of each of the 8 triangular faces. That's correct. Anyone else? Good points.
Malia says there are 12 equilateral triangles in the form.
Well, let's see. The outer has 8, not 12. There are 12 lines, but only 8 equilateral triangles.
And Anne says square root of 3.
Well, that's interesting. Whenever you look at 2 equilateral triangles, you're immediately looking, what do you think of? The Vescopices, right? Because that's, that almond-shaped center part of the 2 circles. And if you draw a line from the apex of the top to the apex of the down-pointing bottom one, that's the square root of 3. In this case, because they're angled, it's not going to have that square root of 3 relationship. But it's relevant. Anyone else? Okay. Great work. Thank you. Here's some additional physical attributes. Some of these you brought forward. I present them again in order to share my illustrations with you. The first group of observations pertains only to the octahedron, and I noticed that no one tackled the geometry of the formula. It's difficult. That's why we're tackling this and spending the whole session on it. So even though in this first group I'm only showing you octahedron-related physical attributes, we may find some subjective correlations to the formula in the second part of our analysis. Okay, the octahedron contains 6 vertices, 8 triangular faces, and 12 edges of equal length. As mentioned before, the octahedron is the dual of the cube, fitting within it in such a way that its 6 vertices conjoin the midpoints of the cube's 6 faces. Like all Platonic solids, the octahedron fits precisely within a sphere and is thus shares a central point with the sphere. Its vertices describe the 2 poles and 4 vertices on the equator of that sphere. An inner sphere fits precisely within the octahedron. The octahedron is the only Platonic solid that can be precisely divided into 2 equal parts along one of 3 sets of 4 edges. Dividing the figure in this way reveals 3 intersecting squares in the interior of the figure. Each of these interior squares represent the common base of 2 opposing pyramids, each consisting of this base plus 4 equilateral triangles. There are 3 pairs of these opposing pyramids, 6 pyramids in all, the apexes of which are connected by one of the 3 axes of the figure. These axes are perpendicular to the interior square bases, which share a common center point with each other and with the axes. So the center point of the squares and the center point of the axes are combined. Okay, now for some physical observations about the formula. The endpoints of the line of water are delineated. One emerges from the earth, the other ends in the ocean, thus bridging 2 elements. This suggests a specific one-way direction of flow. Though more subtly, the endpoints of the line represented by the tree also suggest a one-way flow, the flow of life force from roots to flowers. This flow is reversed from that of a physical plane tree. The endpoints of the line of fire are only described as blazing. They are not delineated from one another in the formula, but DK describes them in his commentary, and what he indicates suggests a flow. We'll get to that in a little bit. The rate of this triple flow, right? The flow of the water, the flow of life force in the tree, and the presumed flow, you might say, of the fire, slows as it moves down through 3 elements. Okay, the 3 eyes are described as 1, always at the midway point, 2, between the 2 extremes, and 3, deep in the tree between the roots and flowers. This final eye is introduced as singular, quote, the eye again is seen, but then described as dual, 2 which look from here to there. The eye made of fire is the eye that knows. The eye fluid as the sea is the eye of vision. The earthly eye is /R, the 2 which look from here to there. A thread of light unites the fiery and fluid eyes. These 3 elemental eyes are brought together in the vital air, which is life and God. Okay, a lot more could be said. I often do spend a lot of time on the physical attributes of our figure. But I think this is enough, because we've got a lot of material to cover. This is enough to move us into the next stage of our analysis. But before we grapple with its meaning and significance, let's take a look at what DK has to say about the formula in general, and then about certain specific geometrical elements in the form. Hang on just a sec, please. Okay, I've paraphrased and combined some of DK's quotes, but all of it comes from his teachings. His most succinct comment or statement concerning the formula is, Formula One is concerned with integration into an ashram, group feeling, and dissipation of glamour through light. In other writings, he expands on these ideas. Can we get a reader for this?
Malia, will you please go ahead?
Sure. Formula One is related to the united sensitivity of the group. Excuse me. As, together, the group members brood upon and come to an understanding of the formula, they will swing into a responsiveness to the feeling and sensitive reactions of the individuals in the group, and these, together, constitute and form the astral body of the group.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, and other writings, well, let's go to this. Can we get another reader for this?
Sure. Heidi, will you read for us, please?
Yeah. Formula One concerns integration into a master's group, and it has two uses. One produces a group inclusiveness, which integrates you with your group, brothers into my group, and brings a revelation of the hidden side of a chella's life. When I say this, I refer to his new astral conditioning. This is given the name of the revelation of group feeling. This concerns united group sensitivity or response, outward to the world of men, inward to the hierarchy, and upward to the monad.
Thank you, Heidi. Notice the three directions: outwards, inwards, and upwards. In a section of Discipleship in the New Age, Volume 2, called Teachings on Initiation, DK describes three stages of inner subjective movement and direction. They are, 1, the stage of the advancing point of light; 2, the stage of right direction, or the focusing of the advancing potency; and 3, the stage of spiritual impact. DK makes a few, but only a few, interpretive comments about the actual text of Formula One. For instance, he tells us that the line of fire between the two blazing points, which are the monad and the soul, represents movement upward towards the monad. So we can see that there is a flow of fire there. This line, we're told, is the higher correspondence to the Antakarana. He also says the formula is basically concerned with the monadic significance of the words from darkness to light, leading to vision and illumined purpose. By the way, for you fans of the Gayatri, the second formula, we're told, leads from the unreal to the real, and the third formula, from death to immortality. But back to Formula One. We're told that the line emerging from the earth and ending in the ocean refers to the Sutratma, and the metaphor of ending in the ocean refers to blending one's consciousness with the ultimate reality. He expands on this teaching in a correspondence to a disciple. And Gabrielle, could you read this for us?
There we go. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. At the time of your full moon approach to me, endeavor to have in your consciousness the words from Formula One. Upon the stream between the two extremes, there floats the eye of vision. You need to remember that from one point of view, these symbols are related to the Antakarana, that line between 2 points, and that as you build the Antakarana in your own lives, so will be the growth of your understanding of the formula. As you progress upon the way of the Chela, so will grow your power. Use the formula actively as far as you can, and do not rest satisfied with just attempting to understand some of its significances. It has a magical import, and when understanding is coupled with the use of the will, this formula constitutes a word of power, of magical service.
Thank you, Gabrielle. DK also gives us some instruction on the eyes. He says, the eye is a keynote and appears in various guises. Behind all the ideas lies the concept of seeing, of a seeing one, looking on at the created whole. So the three eyes are, and let's get a reader for this.
Anne, please go ahead.
Yes, hello. The eye of Shiva, first aspect related to the monad, the subtle world of divine intent. Second, the eye of vision, the conscious observer, the soul, through which duality is being overcome. The greater world of an organized group, integrated and functioning as a unit. 3. The eye that knows. This is the disciple who reacts increasingly to the direction of the spiritual will and to the growth of sensitive response, and in both his brain and his mind consciousness in the three worlds knows. The two eyes, the eye of the disciple and the eye of the personality, the little world of the individual, once individuality is achieved. The right eye is the eye of Buddhi, and the left eye is the eye of Manas. These are the eyes of the high-grade integrated personality and rapport with the soul.
Thank you. Okay, we've looked at the first purpose of the formula, which DK calls revelation of group feeling. This constitutes the astral body of the group. The second purpose of the formula is what DK calls the discovery of the point within the circle. Let's, if we could get a reader for this section too.
Trudy, please go ahead.
This signifies, as far as the group is involved, the revelation of the central coherent force of the group itself. The master at the center of the group. This has its correspondence to the jewel in the lotus, where the individual is concerned, and to the hierarchy, where humanity is concerned. This concept must constitute the foundational idea in all reflection upon this formula.
Thank you. So, with this in mind, let's move into the second and third stages of our analysis, which we'll consider together. So if we could get a reader to read these stages.
Victor, will you read that for us, please?
Okay. A comprehension in the astral or emotional body of its quality, the reaction of a sensitive response to the impact of its qualitative nature, a conceptual consideration of its underlying idea, of what it is intended to teach, of the intellectual meaning it is intended to convey.
Thank you, Victor. Good to have you with us. So we have, DK ascribes meaning to the concrete mind and significance to the emotional realm. So considering our list of physical attributes and DK's comments, what meaning and or significance can we ascribe to the formula of revelation? It's a big question. And to the octahedron as it relates to the formula. The whole purpose of the octahedron is to help get a cohesive understanding of the formula. So let's read the formula once again. We could get a reader, somebody who would like to have the experience of reading the formula.
Let's go back to Scott, please. Will you do that?
Are you talking to me?
Yes, please.
Okay, sure. A line of fire between two blazing points. A stream of water blue, again a line, emerging from the earth and ending in the ocean. A tree with root above and flowers below. Out of the fire and always at the midway point appears the eye of God, Shiva. Upon the stream between the two extremes, there floats the eye of vision. A thread of light unites the two. Deep in the tree, between the root and flowers, the eye again is seen. The eye that knows, the eye that sees, the directing eye. One made of fire, one as fluid as the sea, and two which look from here to there. Fire, water, and the earth. All need the vital air. The air is life, the air is God.
Thank you. So, what can we say about the meaning and significance of the formula of revelation and the octahedron as it relates to this formula? As you're thinking about this, keep in mind our list of physical attributes. To get things moving, here are a couple of observations. The four elements, air, fire, water, and earth, considered in their classical sense, provide for our substantive physical plane existence. There are higher correspondents, earth for all that's physical, including the etheric plane, water for the astral, fire for the mental, and air for the Buddhic plane, provide us with the entire form world, called the lower quaternary, plus the airy goal of our endeavor, the Buddhic plane. These elements within the context of the formula provide a progressive method of becoming, represented by the lines between the points in the formula and the axes of the octahedron. Remember, DK says, the formulas are concerned with the 6 intermediate expansions of consciousness occurring between the major initiations. Because Formula 1 is concerned with gaining the experience of group feeling, which relates to the astral plane, my guess is that this formula of revelation deals with the expansion of consciousness that occurs between the first and second initiation, but that's only a guess. The lines or axes could be seen as the path we take from one initiation to the next through the building of the Antakarana. So, any further thoughts as to the meaning and significance of the formula of revelation and the octahedron as it relates to this formula? Anyone? Yael, do we have any takers?
We do. Helen says the octahedron as the dual of the cube reflects and demonstrates. I'm not sure if she had more to say. Let me ask her. Helen, was there more? I'm not hearing you. Okay.
We'll go ahead with the next comment.
Okay, and then Heidi has a comment. So, Heidi, please go ahead.
Sorry about that. Whenever I have like an immediate thing and then I don't always hold it. But I was struck by what was said. One was the earth, meaning the all, and its horizontal position, so it spreads out, as well as water being an element that actually spreads over the top of earth. And then looking at it, if you were to look at the fire that is actually moving from above to below that midpoint, that point.
Yeah, that describes the 3 axes, doesn't it? Yeah, pretty much as they are shown in this illustration.
And that air is absolutely needed to, like, as a transition between a solid and a less solid. So as you're moving from one level of consciousness through this, there's a point where there's this, you're in the air of it and not so connected to the actual lines or distinctions that come through the form. And there has to be this trust that has to happen in that place of air where you're not necessarily as connected or grounded in the structure of the form.
Right, and also we have to remember that air is related to, as is fire, but specifically air to prana, that we gain
to the breath,
prana through the breath. And so, and prana is the life force, which in a sense animates all the other three elements. Yeah. Thank you, Heidi, for that. Any other thoughts about this?
Yes,
people?
we got a little bit of clarification from Helen. She says, the octahedron as the dual of the cube reflects the images of the tree and the elements above and below.
Oh, yeah, I like that. That's interesting. Thank you for that. Other thoughts?
Yes, hold on. Please go ahead, Scott.
This idea, this jewel in the lotus here, the octahedron appears that inside the cube, centered as it is. And then you have a center point that's monadic. Also looking at, just thinking about the basic equilateral triangle and the dual of that, the six-pointed star. What we have here is the six vertices of the octahedron, is that perfectly interlaced double triangle. And it's put in 3 dimensions.
Put in 3 dimensions, right? Yeah, I think it's the most effective explication of the six-pointed star in 3 dimensions. I looked at this at the possibilities for a while, and that's revealed by that that one illustration I showed you, where I literally turned the semi-transparent octahedron in space, and it is in fact a hexagon with a six-pointed star at the center of it. I also like your reference to the idea of the lotus, because you have this. The other thing about the octahedron is quite interesting, is that you have this duality. Somebody's on not on self-mute. So you have, because you have that which is oriented towards the below and that which is oriented towards the above. And that's very much like the lotus, which has that which is below the surface of the water, reaching down to that earthy point at the bottom, and that which is oriented towards the air and the elements above. Okay, folks, any other thoughts about the meaning and significance of both the octahedron and the formula of revelation? Brownie points for anybody that can relate them together.
Okay, I'm not so sure if that's what's happening here, but Gabriel has a comment. If the octahedron is the dual, or the inner figure of the cube, might it and its significances represent the inner life, or the soul and monadic presence within our imprisoning cube?
The short answer would be yes, and as a metaphor, in my estimation, and that's what my intuition tells me, that and there's a number of geometrical qualities that suggest this to be true. Prime among them the fact that you're moving from 6 squares to 8 equilateral triangles, and yet you hold the same 3 axes. And I think that's what relates them, and that's what delineates them. Thank you, Gabrielle. Anyone else?
I don't see any hands or any more comments at this point.
Okay.
Hold on. Heidi, did you have a comment?
Yeah, it's just I was listening to everybody, and it's a little different verbiage, but it says the same thing, I believe, is that this is what I received was form gives rise to the expansion of consciousness, returning to it with each turn of the spiral. And as I was listening to the significance of the form as it relates to the air, so to speak, which brings in the possibility of expanding the consciousness, it always returns to that form, which somebody talked about, Gabrielle talked about it in a beautiful way, that it's always returning to that form to expand once again out of it. Anyway, I just received something beautiful from listening to everybody, and I don't know that I was able to put the words to it correctly, but that was the way they formulated for me. And more than anything, I feel very touched by the focus of the participants. And I think this little piece is probably why I'm here. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Heidi, and welcome to the group. Yes, another way of looking at this is that the form is constantly evolving, right? So because this octahedron is itself a form, we could say that it's a solar form within an earthly form, which, as Gabrielle suggested, is, 2 points of our 3-point constitution. So I have some additional thoughts. If the cube represents the body or bodies of an incarnate human being, perhaps its dual, the triangular-sided octahedron, represents the responsive indwelling jiva. This point was just made, but I have an illustration here that shows the connection between the two. Both are aligned to the same 3 axes, but it is the jiva, not the form world, represented by the cube, that controls the direction and rate of becoming through its responsiveness to the central I in one of its 3 forms. Okay, so we have each of the axes represents a specific kind of responsiveness to the I, which is described in the formula as actually separate I's. These axes are described in the formula as 3 lines. Each of these lines has its higher point in the causal realm. The monad for the line of fire, the ocean of life for the line of water, and the upturned roots in the tree, which also suggests causal levels. These correspond to, first, the axis of personality, which evolves into the axis of the disciple, and then the axis of the soul and the axis of the monad. At the invisible center is the 3-in-1 point of life, described in the formula as the I that bridges each duality. They are one because ultimately they are all expressions of the one life. Yet they are 3 in their sequential influence because they stand at the midpoint of each axis. Now, the midway point of each of the lower 3 planes is the 4th subplane, and the midway point of the entire cosmic physical plane is the Buddhic plane, the realm of air, a kind of uber midway point that has to do with the higher initiations. Can we get a reader for this description of this 4th subplane?
Trudy, will you read, please?
Each of the 3 persons of the Trinity manifests equally as to the man as spirit, soul or ego, and substance. In connection with Brahma, we have the spirit aspect animating the three higher subplanes of every plane, or the first fire aspect. His soul aspect is found on the fourth subplane of each plane, whereon are situated the etheric centers of all manifested entities. His substance aspect is primarily contacted on the three lower subplanes. Hence, we have the 49 fires of matter, or the 7 fires of each plane, the union of the higher 3 and the lower 3 producing that blaze which we call the wheels of fire, or the centers on the fourth subplane of each plane. This fourth subplane has a peculiar and close relation to the fourth creative hierarchy, that of the human monads.
Thank you. So we see that the central point, or subplane, represents the soul. Now, just as the axes of the octahedron meet at this point, so do the central points of the three inner squares of our octagon, which represent the three fields of endeavor of the lower quaternary. You can see those three here in this illustration, one red, one blue, and the horizontal one is green. Okay, when this point of balance is reached, the indwelling jiva shifts from form to spirit orientation. We're moving along any one of these axes. There's a fundamental shift that happens, and this is the nature of the fourth subplane. This the shift is facilitated by the fourth law of magnetic control, which holds sway on the fourth subplane of each plane. GK tells us a man reaches the point of personality attainment in this cycle when he has the capacity to vibrate and move consciously on the fourth subplane. We might term the fourth subplane on the physical, emotional, and mental planes. When dominated, aligned, and functioning simultaneously in the same incarnation, the plane of perfected personality in the concrete sense of the word, and from the lower vision. So when this alignment is achieved, a stage of becoming we call the integrated personality, we become as the flowers on the reversed flowering tree, which represents the fulfillment of life incarnate. At this stage, the vertical axis is that of the personality, represented by the green axis. We move along it, evolving, as it were, in accordance with the vibration of the lower self. But under the gaze of the dual directing eye, which influences us to respond increasingly to the direction of spiritual will. Eventually, through those efforts that characterize the life of a disciple, we reach the midway point of our personality/disciple axis, and our rotation slows and then reverses. In the outer world, this reversal manifests as the life of a disciple. This allows another axis to exert its influence, the axis aligned with the egoic body. It rotates until it becomes the vertical axis. At this point, the dual eye that looks from here to there, the mediator of the personality axis, the line of earth in the formula, is eclipsed by the, or integrated by the eye of vision. It's important to realize that it's not left behind. It's it becomes, in a sense, part of the equipment of the jiva. So, having achieved the flowering of the integrated personality, we now become the waters that spring from the earth, moving toward the ocean of oneness. Now, water is inherently decentralized. Its very existence seems to participate in unity. Water that springs from the earth is like the soul that dominates the personality. It breaks through and moves towards the sea of oneness, or moves us towards the sea of oneness. This line of water ending in the ocean is also a metaphor for aligning the astral with the Buddhic vehicle. So this quote from DK, can we get a reader for this, please?
Victor, you're on. Oh, there you go. Can you please read it?
When man begins, in a small sense, to coordinate the Buddhic vehicle, or to express it otherwise, when he has developed the power to contact ever so slightly the Buddhic plane, then he begins simultaneously and consciously to achieve the ability to escape from the etheric web of the physical plane. Later he escapes from its correspondence on the astral plane, and finally from the correspondence on the fourth subplane of the mental plane, this time via the mental unit.
Thank you, Victor. By following the rule as above, so below, we can hypothesize that at some point on the way towards the ocean of oneness, the fiery eye of Shiva begins to exert its influence of divine intent, at which time another reversal takes place, and the third axis, the axis of monadic fire, begins to dominate the movement of the indwelling Shiva. Notice how the dual pyramid structure of the octahedron emphasizes the shift that takes place at the central point or subplane, or the fourth subplane. The down-pointing pyramid in each paradigm suggests the form world, relatively speaking. The upturned pyramid, the spiritual. Thus, the advanced personality becomes the disciple, and the soul-infused Jiva identifies with the monad. The three stages represented by the lines in the formula and axis in the octahedron are directly related to the three crosses, which a point that was brought up quite early in this webinar. The axis whereon the directing eye dominates is the experience on the mutable cross. The axis whereon the eye of vision dominates is the experience on the fixed cross. And finally, the axis whereon the fiery eye of Shiva dominates is one's experience on the cardinal cross. I want to emphasize here that moving from one axis onto another through the help of the eye is a move into a ever more profound dimension of consciousness. And we illustrate that by a shift in physical direction, but that's a metaphor for a process of deepening. Okay. The next stage in DK's analysis is threefold. He tells us the stage of the synthetic grasp of the purpose of a symbol, of its place in an ordered manifesting plan, and of its true unified intent. The stage is not about attributes, rather it has to do with synthesis and unity, synthetic purpose and unified intent. Just as the first stage has to do with the physical plane, the second, that's the physical analysis, the second with the astral, that's significance, and the third with the mental plane, that's the meaning. This stage suggests we apply our intuition and thus achieve an even more elevated awareness of the formula of revelation. Of course, this is a lifetime's work, but we're touching on the possibilities here in this webinar. Okay, here are the three stages. Oops, here we go. The stage of the synthetic grasp of the purpose of a symbol, of its place in an ordered manifesting plan, of its true unified intent. So, what is the synthetic purpose or unified intent of the formula of revelation? And what is its place in an ordered manifesting plan? It's a very huge, huge question. But nothing attempted, nothing gained, right? Okay, just as our list of physical attributes helped us to extrapolate significance and meaning, perhaps our list of significance and meaning will help us towards a synthetic understanding of the purpose and place of the formula of revelation. We might ask, what single purpose embraces all the attributes listed here? Any ideas? You're going to need to take a moment to consider this. Bill, let me know when you get a response, but feel free to take your time.
Okay, so far nothing.
Not surprising. We deal in big questions in these webinars. Maybe not, the answers aren't as big as the questions, but
Okay,
we
here
do
we
what we can.
here we go. We have a taker. Please go ahead, Trudy.
I don't know whether that's relevant, but as above, so below.
Yes, it is. It is actually as relevant as can be. Yes, it it it's a linking formula, isn't it? In so many ways, as described by the lines and the unity of the eyes. So yes, that's very much relevant. Thank you for that, Trudy. Okay, folks, she's broken the ice for us. So now it should be easy for everyone to think of a pithy comment.
Okay, we have something here from Anne, and then we've got some hands up, but I may need to unmute Anne so she can explain, because part of it isn't finished. If the one pyramid moves towards the other, we have 10 of the perfected man a star, the 10 of the perfected man a star. Why don't you go ahead and explain, please, Anne?
Well, if the one pyramid moves upwards, then it forms a star, and then we will have 10, the number 10, which signifies the perfected man, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah, it's a mix of metaphors, because we're looking at two pyramids and the whole idea of the 5 becoming the 10. But it's also quite true. It's interesting. The physical pyramid of Giza, which is actually really close to the dimensions of the top half of the octahedron, the angle of the triangles is not quite as tall. It's at 51 degrees rather than 60 degrees, but it's very similar. And then you have, interestingly enough, a reverse, an implied reverse pyramid, because there's a passage that goes deep into the earth and ends in what's called pit. And, one can't help but extrapolate the idea of the 3 stages of becoming, because you have the major rooms in the pyramid, the pit, and then you have the Queen's Chamber, and then you have the Great Gallery, which ascends between the Queen's and the King's Chamber. So the movement, as you said, up from the reverse pyramid along any one of the 3 axes is definitely part of the process of becoming the perfected man. So yes, thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, and then before I get to Victor, who's got his hand up, let me just read what Jeremy's typed, which is very similar to what you and Ann have just been talking about. The 3 faces of the upper pyramid represent the Atma Buddhi Manas of the soul as an expression of the monad. The lower triangle represents the physical, emotional, and mental vehicles of the personality. The building of the perfect octahedron is the path of the disciple, utilizing the forces of fire, water, air, which are directed by the 3 eyes of Shiva, knowing into an integrated, divine, living, energetic form of creative intelligence, love, and will.
Wonderful. This must be Jeremy Condit. Is it?
No, O'Neill.
Oh, really? Oh, well, very well spoken. We have a staff member, Jeremy Gondik, and that was so well said that I thought it was him. Yes, very, very nicely said. I would make one correction, however, that there's 4 triangular faces on top and bottom of this. But nonetheless, the import of what you said is absolutely correct. Anyone else?
Victor's patiently been waiting for us. Please go ahead, Victor.
Hi there, everybody. When I was listening to all these comments, they were all very fine and everything. But one thing that I had a meditation and I had an idea or something that came to me about the creation of everything, and there was all that was everything, and then one bit of motion caused 3, so you have the 1, the 3, and then of course the 7. Well, then when I hear you talk about this particular figure, you have the 4, the square, and then you have the triangles, the 3, there's your 7, and the integration of these, of course, is going to get you back to the 1.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So you have the cube could represent, in a sense, the 4, and that's been internalized through the 3 internal squares of the octahedron. So the square still has its role in you could say, the life of the octahedron, which is the life of the jiva, at least as we're describing it. But instead of the 4 dominating, the 3 begin to dominate with the idea of moving to the 1. So yeah, nicely said, Victor. Thank you. Other thoughts, comments about the meaning, or no, not about the meaning and significance so much as the unified intent and the place in an ordered manifesting plan of the formula of revelation and the octahedron. Anyone?
Hold on. Please go ahead, Scott.
Have we looked at the octahedron as specifically symbolizing the element of air? Of the 5 Platonic solids, that it represents the element of air?
I don't know just how that works. Do you have specific knowledge of that fact?
No, we went over it once. I have notes.
Yeah, I don't remember either. That it would be really great if it was, and relevant in this, certainly in this context.
Well,
but
from the Lawler book from Sacred Geometry, we that up associates them with the elements and what Prakriti and Purusha.
Yeah, that would be interesting to determine. Yeah, I think the tetrahedron is related to fire. The cube would be related to earth, almost certainly. So which would be related to water? That would be the question.
The dodecahedron is universal. It's the Prakriti, that encloses them all.
Yeah, and it's
shaped as a dodecahedron. Is that Plato said?
Yeah, that's the synthesizing element, right? The 5th element, the dodecahedron, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Which leaves us with the tetrahedron, right? And the octahedron. So it would be, and we're looking at
fire and
air. So tetrahedron for fire. I'd say it's a strong candidate and may very likely be the one for air. But I can't say for sure. So.
Francis, can I say something on that?
Yes, sir.
Michael here. It's struck me that the mercurial association of the number 8 is very, very strong. It's sort of the guardian of the 8th gate and the ruler of the Buddhic plane. And, bringing in sort of the Scorpio reference there for the number 8, it seems to have much to do with the Buddhic plane and where man expresses himself as an extension of the monad. So I have read, as has Scott, you all dealt with this earlier, I do believe that the octahedron is usually associated with the plane of air. And, I extend the idea with the idea of Buddhi, Mercury, Scorpio, and the number 8. I think there are a number of associations which seem to put it there. And I think, we can back up that idea with some reasonable thoughts.
Well, thank you for that. Yeah, I like this idea of its relation to Scorpio with the triple quality of Scorpio, which you have by the apex of the down-pointing and the up-pointing pyramid, as well as the center. And then this idea of 8 also as a number of Christ, and it being the sole principle.
Yes, it's such an amazing formula. Everyone's doing such a great job at this. It's really wonderful what's coming out here. It seems to be the whole formula for the ascent of the human being, and eventually its absorption into the ocean of life. It's sort of the Madame Blavatsky formula in a way, The life absorbs them all, and you have the monad, the soul, and the personality, and it's all absorbed. So it seems very central to what a human being is, this particular formula and this particular geometric solid.
Yes, indeed. I think that, the beauty of this formula is that it gives, in a sense, 3 axes of ascension, because, each of them, the fiery one, of course, moves you to the monad, the watery one to the ocean of life, which is a kind of it's almost like the difference between an occult and a mystical approach. But then you also have this idea of the reversed roots, which is, it's quite, I don't even pretend at all that, we've cracked the final mystery of this, but certainly I think we have our fingers in it.
It's very good, very good.
But
I've always puzzled over this thing, for years, studying it and teaching it and puzzling over it, and I almost have to watch the image in front of my eye to follow it. So it went by quickly, but it was very, very, very useful. So much of value is coming out. Thank you so much, Francis. And
so shouldn't you be in bed, though?
I should be, but a terrible thing happened. I have a broadcast tomorrow morning, and suddenly the computer, the broadcasting program stopped, so I'll have to deal with Brett after all of this is over.
Oh, my God.
I thought it's God telling me I better be on this webinar. Okay.
Oh, okay. Well, it's wonderful to have you here, and thank you. It's, by the way, everybody, it's 12:30 Norway time, so we can put in our gratitude to Michael for showing up for this.
It's excellent work, Francis, and everybody. Excellent work.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. So, anyone else have any thoughts on the purpose or unified intent?
Gabriel has given us some comments that are very similar to what you and Michael were just talking about. The formula and the octahedron seem like instructions for the jiva in form, moving toward increasing unifications. The figure itself, if it fully represents intuitively the formula, seems like it might be an image of the jewel in the lotus, the monad within the egoic lotus, exerting its influence from life to life, initiation to initiation, until its essence is fully expressed.
Oh, that's very beautiful, Gabrielle. Thank you. Yeah, I like the idea of this being, it is a gem-like, isn't it? You can easily imagine a jewel cut in the shape of an octahedron. Well, when you part those last petals, that 12th petal that hides the jewel within the lotus, Om Mani Padme Hum, come back and tell us what shape that inner jewel is. We'd all be thrilled to know, I'm sure. Thank you for that. Other ideas, other comments?
Well, I don't see. There we go. I see a hand that keeps coming up and going down.
I see it too. Yes.
Okay, go ahead, please, Eva.
Hi. I never know
Hi.
if my hand is up or if it's down.
Yeah.
Hi there.
Hi.
I only wanted to comment a little bit about the roots being at the top. I've also thought about this over the years, and what seems to always land in my consciousness is that the roots are always embedded where the source of life really is, isn't it?
Mm, yeah.
The source is always moving everything upward. Well, here the source is coming from the top down, as it does. The monad and the soul come to us from the top down. But yeah, we just need to understand that and recognize that. And that's why the trunk, of course, represents that antakarana that leads us right back to the source.
Mm-hmm.
Just simple.
Thank you. No, it's very apropos, and it makes me think that the octahedron, that the two pyramids of the octahedron, you could see, if you were going to just look at it from the point of view of the tree, for instance, that you could see that the bottom one would represent the normal tree, which would be the way we grow up out of this environment called the earth, or to expand it a little bit, the lower quaternary, right? And then you reach this influence of this other experience, which is the tree growing downwards, and recognize that, no, my source is not the womb of my mother, my garden. It is the monad, and that's, so you have this, in a sense, this double tree represented by the octahedron here. But thank you, Eva, for that.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay, folks, other comments?
Yes, Victor, please go ahead.
Yes, it's interesting that Eva and Francis have both said something similar to what I was thinking. Must mean we're so connected. Mine was about the roots as well. The roots are sticking up in the air. The air is God, and the flowering is on earth. In the comment.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the nature of incarnation in a way. It's recognizing that just by becoming an integrated personality, in a sense, you fulfilled the one of the purposes behind human existence, right? And then a whole new life starts, and you start responding to another energy. Okay, our time. I just looked at the time, and we're very late. So I'm going to move it along here so that we can actually get to the end at some point. Okay, hang on a sec. Got to find my place here. So here's my idea as to the synthetic purpose of the formula of revelation and its place in an ordered manifesting plan. It's an interesting coincidence. The Eye of Ra, depicted at the center of this figure, represents the renewal and rebirth of the influence of the sun in ancient Egyptian mythology. And it thus goes forth at the time of the winter solstice, and we're just here just a couple of days less away from that event. In the ancient Egyptian esoteric tradition, this eye is a personification and is thus feminine of the spirit of the sun. It is universal and omnipresent. Sailors painted it on the prow of their ships for protection. I believe that this Eye of Ra called Wadjet in Lower Egypt. Not watch it, but Wadjet is the eye of the formula of revelation. Is that triple I we've been talking about. For it reveals itself to those who have found their way to the midway point. The I, which is multidimensional and thus appears in many guises, represented by the axes, presents itself in accordance with the consciousness of the seeker who stands before it. In Theosophy, this I believe, is the I of the one initiator, whose influence penetrates the depths of illusion, glamour, and Maya, so that the seeker can find his or her way between the pairs of opposites towards the light of unity. Hence the key words of this formula, from darkness to light. Okay, the final stage in DK's expanded criteria for analyzing a symbol is identification with the quality and purpose of the symbol as it is illuminated by the mind held steady in the light. This final stage brings into activity the brain as well as the mind. So let's attempt to identify with, rather than merely reflect on, the quality and purpose of the formula of revelation. We'll take exactly 1 minute to do this, starting now. Okay. Well, that's it for today. I hope you've enjoyed the webinar. Next month, we'll finish our survey of the number 6, which will include an analysis of the 6-armed swastika, as well as a close look at the 6th ray, the color rose, and how the number 6 affects astrology. The reading list remains the same, except for an additional section on the formulas, page 363 to 380 of Discipleship in the New Age, Volume 2. Let me get that reading list up here. Like last time, our visualization for this session will be on Formula 1, the formula of revelation. Notice during this meditation whether your increased familiarity with this formula has changed your interior experience of it. Remember, DK said, this formula has a magical import, and when understanding is coupled with the use of the will, it constitutes a word of power of magical service. Michael, are you still with us?
Yes, I am. I am, Francis.
Would you be willing to? Would you be willing to read this formula for us as a closing?
Yes, sure. I'm happy to do that.
That would be great.
Understanding it is another matter. Okay.
Sure is.
Happy to read it.
Okay, what I'll do is start and end with an ohm. So if I'll sound the ohm, or why don't you go? Why don't you do that? You're adept at sounding ohms, so you just take it from here.
Sounded a lot of them. I'll use the note G. Why not? Okay.
Sounds good.
A line of fire between two blazing points. A stream of water blue, again a line, emerging from the earth and ending in the ocean. A tree with root above and flowers below. Out of the fire, and always at the midway point, appears the eye of God, Shiva. Upon the stream, between the two extremes, there floats the eye of vision. A thread of light unites the two. Deep in the tree, between the root and flowers, the eye again is seen. The eye that knows, the eye that sees, the directing eye. One made of fire, one fluid as the sea, and two which look from here to there. Fire, water, and the earth all need the vital air. The air is life. The air is God.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, that's it for today. Don't forget to donate a few bucks to the Moria Federation at moriafederation.com, which will help pay the yearly fee for this GoToMeeting account that makes these webinars possible. Thank you, Brett, for making these webinars available on makara.us. And as always, thank you, BL, for your continued invaluable assistance. Keep spreading the word, folks. Call your mom or that weird uncle that might be interested. And I'll just end by saying thank you all for attending. And to the new faces, a special thanks. Hope to see you all again next month, and which is always on the third Sunday of the month. And next month it'll be January 17th, 2016. So have a blessed solstice, and I'll see you next year. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.